Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well and having a great Wednesday night. In tonight's forecast update, we're going to be talking about the winter storm that is still ongoing across portions of Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. And so we're going to be just discussing that and also discussing the potential for another band of snow in the morning, really throughout the early morning hours tomorrow on Thursday across portions of the Carolinas as well as the mid-Atlantic. And then for the rest of the video, we'll be talking about what we could expect for kind of the medium to long range. And we'll just be looking at what we could potentially see as we get through the second half of February into early March. First off, you're looking at the HRRR weather model for tonight into tomorrow. And so as you can see right here, we have our system finally moving off to the east, and there's still this snow band here into northeastern North Carolina and then into Virginia, Maryland, and a small section of Delaware. And so if we continue this on here, that snow is going to finally still linger around for the next couple of hours, and then I would say by about 3 or 4 a.m. tomorrow on Thursday, most of that should be finally moved out into the Atlantic Ocean. But then if we focus out here into Michigan, into Indiana, Ohio, even Kentucky right here, you have another band of snow and kind of a separate, well, not really separate, but more energy kind of diving down here. And you have well below freezing temperatures into these areas, so cold air is not a question. And you're going to have a little bit of moisture there, so that'll basically turn into some light to moderate snow, especially across, I would say, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia. And then by tomorrow morning, that snow, kind of like light to moderate snow band, gains some traction even more and moves into Pennsylvania again, West Virginia, Virginia, and even North Carolina and South Carolina. And again, this is going to be a pretty much light to moderate snow, but some areas, especially up here into Pennsylvania, I would say, even Ohio and West Virginia, could pick up at least maybe another half inch. And some of these areas farther south could see a couple tenths of an inch just from this band alone. And so it tries to get going here into North Carolina and South Carolina by the late morning hours, but you still have this other band. And then still with this band up here into New York State, Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey, it tries to get its act together again, and it's kind of in tandem with this this low pressure out here, our winter storm, well out to the Atlantic by this point, and it tries to get that band going again, get some moisture out here, and you have snow across the mid-Atlantic into some of these areas, and even into southern New England. These areas could see just a quick hitting, I would say again, light to moderate snow band. I mean, some of these areas could see just a quick hitting heavy snow band, but most of this will be light. But some of this might catch some people by surprise, and again, that could add up to maybe a couple tenths of an inch for some areas, and even up to maybe a half inch, a quarter of an inch, even maybe 1 inch for some people. But that is going to be about it for Thursday, and really by Thursday night, most of that should have pretty much moved out of the area, and then by early Friday, it is just completely moved out into the Atlantic. Now switching more to the medium and long range here, and we'll be looking at the 18Z European weather model. And so as you can see down here, here's our low pressure, our winter storm moving on out finally into the Atlantic, and then there's our secondary kind of band, or I should say bands of snow into the mid-Atlantic and portions of the Northeast. And we continue this on as we get into Friday and then even into Saturday this weekend. It's mostly calm across much of the continental United States, but if we go back here a little bit and look into the western U.S., you could still see some snow into the, again, higher elevations into the western U.S., tonight, late tonight, into tomorrow on Thursday, and most of that should finally taper off and move on out by at least early Friday morning or pretty much midday Friday. And after that, continuing on into the weekend, you do have some moisture out here into the northwestern U.S., but not a whole lot. And you still continue that forward into Sunday. You could see some maybe light snow showers up here in the northeast U.S. by Sunday morning potentially, and even some moisture down here into the Gulf, moving into portions of the southern U.S. And again, this is mostly quiet as we get into even early next week. And then finally, you see a low pressure start to develop here, just a little bit across portions of North Dakota and Minnesota. And you also have a low pressure way out here off the northwest coast. And continuing that on still, you could see maybe something here, I would say early next week, maybe a kind of quick hitting clipper system for possibly the Great Lakes region, and even the Northeast. But the European just shows us mostly with kind of a mix here of snow and rain for the most part, because if we look at temperatures, that's how temperatures are probably going to look as we get into early next week, because we're going to get into a little bit of a warming period, a warming trend here into much of the U.S., especially into the kind of northeastern U.S. and mid-Atlantic compared to what we've been seeing. So if we continue this back here and look at the European still, you can see that system finally starts to move through, and we'll go to the 12Z European, and finally has that moving out by maybe midweek next week. And then after that, we're not too sure what'll happen, but I do think we'll have another potential system late next week. We'll have to watch them. We'll look at the EPS and GEFS ensembles for that system. But just going back here a little bit, I know I keep going back and forth, but one thing to note here that I really didn't mention is the extremely cold temperatures that'll continue to move in, especially across the central U.S. As we get into tomorrow on Thursday, you have the bulk of the below average temperatures, you could say, into the central U.S. Some areas seeing over 20 degrees below average into Kansas, Oklahoma, and just quite a bit of the central U.S. But pretty much the central and eastern U.S. will be below average as far as temperatures go as we get into the latter portion of this week and even into this weekend. Much of these areas will still be below average, and then finally again by early next week we could see a bit of a warm up by Monday and even Tuesday, but those below average temperatures will stay around for much of the weekend, especially across the eastern U.S., but for some portions of the central U.S. as well. And then as we get that little bit of a warming trend, we warm up a little bit. And again, I think we'll have another system, as I just mentioned, move through, and we'll have cold air return to the eastern U.S. and potentially portions of the central U.S. as well. And so finally, we'll go back here and look at the EPS ensembles, and we'll look at the 12Z here, and we can get a little bit of a better look. So again, still shows that warming trend there early next week, and then by late next week we could see that cold air return. And I think once this cold air returns, we could see it just for maybe, I wouldn't say just for a few days, because that is pretty far out, but I do think we'll have at least a couple of days where we'll have at least below average temperatures into portions of the eastern U.S., possibly the central U.S. by, again, late next week into next weekend. And if we look at our ensemble member, low pressure here, low pressures, and so we can get an idea of where we could see our maybe potential next system or low pressure. And so each of these little red numbers here are areas of low pressure, and that is the different, this is basically an average of quite a few different members from the EPS ensembles put together. So this isn't going to be each different low pressure for this time period. So you're not going to see several low pressures at the same time. It just gives us an average, especially the kind of greenish to orange and yellow colors that represents areas of low pressure, or the greatest areas of low pressure, I should say. And so we do have a signal again as we get into late next week, for a low pressure to move in, especially with that other, that'd be kind of clipper system next week. But then behind that, we have a greater signal for a system late next week into next weekend. And so I think, again, this will be the system that delivers that cold air to the eastern and central U.S. So that'll just be the main things we'll have to watch. And again, we can't really get too far into this, kind of into the small details, because it is, again, far out. But I would say as we get into early next week, we'll start to get a better idea of what could happen. And just real quick, we'll look at the GFS, and we'll see what it shows for late next week. And it does show a kind of a pretty strong, I would say, winter storm for the Northeast um, there. So that's just what the GFS shows. If we look at the European for the same time frame, again, it's going to change quite a bit. So just don't take this as it's going to happen for sure. But it has that low pressure in kind of generally the same area for late next week. But again, it's just too far out to pinpoint these small details. And then finally, we'll look at the European AI model, which has been doing pretty well for the past couple of weeks with these systems. And it shows a system well down into the southeast, and it looks like it has it moving up, well, kind of like the European and GFS, but it has a extremely strong low pressure right there, 954 low pressure by next weekend. So that would be just an absolute blizzard there if that were to happen. But we'll see how this plays out, and let's just compare some of the previous runs on the European I model. And it's been somewhat consistent with the path of that. But if we go back a little bit here, it's been somewhat consistent. But again, we'll have to keep our eyes out for what could potentially happen late next week. And the European AI model will probably be a model we'll continue to use because it's been doing well over the past couple of weeks. But that'll be about it for the kind of medium to long range forecast. So that'll be it for tonight's update. I appreciate all of y'all watching, and I do apologize for not having a video out before the winter storm hit. I just did not have a whole lot of time to make one, and I just was not able to get one uploaded. But I want to try to start to get these forecasts out a little more regularly as we get probably later into February and especially into March. And I think once we get into severe weather season, I'll start to really try to upload more and more. But I appreciate all my returning viewers, anybody who has watched my forecast before. I appreciate all of y'all being here and returning to the channel. And if you are new, welcome to the channel. I appreciate you clicking on this forecast. And that'll be it for tonight's update. And I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's Wednesday night and Thursday.